This is also kind of interesting, and it'll tell you kind of what we were talking about relative to the Browns' offense. This is from the 33rd team. Uh, so it's the lowest offensive success rate this season. Success rate equals when a play gains 40% of yards to go on first down, 60% of yards to go on second down, and 100% of yards to go on third or fourth down. Browns are the worst, 36.5%. Colts with Joe Flacco are second worst, 36.7. Texans also 36.7. You see the Raiders. Colts with Anthony Richardson are fifth, which is, it'll tell you things are really rough in Indianapolis, 37.8, and the Panthers fifth. But again, when we talk about how bad this offense has been, those are numbers that, they're pretty damning with the offense.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody out there follows Austin Gale on Twitter or X, I mean, for every week of the Deshaun Watson saga, Austin was posting these sort of series of all-time futility stats, EPA per play. I mean, the Browns were genuinely operating not just the worst offense in the NFL this season, but one of the worst offenses in this millennium, with any quarterback at the helm. It was historically terrible. So it may have ticked upwards in the right direction with Jameis Winston at quarterback, but it has been for a full season effectively genuinely atrocious. The Colts make some sense as well with Anthony Richardson simply because of the inaccuracy and the incredibly low percentage of passes he's been completing. Flacco, I think, is a little bit of a victim of the defenses and the opponents that he's faced. He's come in against two very good defenses, and I think that definitely hurts his overall production. And so his is kind of, I think, a bit of a false positive there on a small sample size. But yeah, it's definitely been pretty bad for both those teams.
All right, take a look at this chart. This is, again, it's the percentage to sack, pressure to sack percentage and time to pressure percentage. And you see the two Browns quarterbacks are getting pressured quickly and getting sacked quickly at a high percentage. So the average time to pressure is across the screen. That's the x-axis. Up and down would be the sacks. See, there are quarterbacks that are getting pressured quicker who are not getting sacked as much. So it's a combination of offensive line and quarterback processing that's what that tells you. Is that the way you read that as well?
Yeah, it's a really interesting chart because generally the time to pressure is going to be something of an offensive line driven stat. Certainly the quicker the time to pressure is. But the pressure to sack rate is a quarterback driven data point. So generally quarterbacks can control whether or not they get sacked when the pressure arrives. Now, there are going to be some times where that's not true. The first thing they know about a sack arriving is when they get, nailed from an angle that they haven't even seen the guy. But generally speaking, the quarterback is in control over whether that pressure is just a hurry or if it turns into a hit or a sack. They can get rid of the football. But they're not in control of when the pressure arrives if it's coming quickly. Now, they can control it the longer they linger with the ball. Obviously, the more pressure you're going to get. But this is interesting because I think you see some teams where the offensive line isn't great. They're allowing pressure, but the quarterback is able to get rid of the ball and mitigate that pressure and not have it turn into catastrophic plays. And then you have the reverse is true. Now, what you're seeing with those two Browns quarterbacks is they're on the wrong side of both those data points. The offensive line has absolutely been struggling and it's been hemorrhaging quick pressure, but also the both quarterbacks have been bad at turning that into sacks. They've been amplifying really the negative impact of the pressures that are coming, and they've been allowing a large proportion of those pressures to become sacks. So it's the worst of both worlds.
Yeah, and the question becomes: is the offense giving you the answers quick enough, or is it, which would lead to, is the scheme creating some of those sacks as well? Which that's even more concerning.
Yeah, and none of these things operates in a vacuum, right? So the quarterback controls part of that pressure as well. You need answers both in terms of scheme, but also in terms of the protections that you're calling and making sure you have the right protections called for the looks that you're seeing before the snap. And then even with pressure to sack rates, those can be influenced by receivers, by all these other things as well. So it's the awkward thing about football is that none of these data points are clean and not influenced. There's always confounding factors in every one of these data points you're looking at.